So Laura, you actually, I haven't talked to anybody who's had this experience. You kind of grew up in law firms.
I did. Yeah, my mom actually had worked for law firms kind of since the beginning of her career. She's actually has a bachelor's in secretarial work.
Okay.
This back in the 70s. Um, she worked for Winthrop and Weinstein here in Minneapolis for 30 years by the time she retired. So I literally grew up going to their office in St. Paul and then in Minneapolis since I was like 8. So
Wow.
um, yeah, then I interned. I interviewed Andrea Wood actually in college for a paper.
No kidding.
Um, yeah, yeah. So, and then I ended up graduating college in 2007, which was right before the Great Recession. So
Sure.
that ended up being a really good role to transition into post college.
And technology has always been part of who you are and how you operate, right?
Yeah, I from a very young age, I knew I was going to be a writer. My parents had like an entire library down in our basement that I was just obsessed with. So I read really early. I was writing really early, and I knew I wanted to do that. But my dad is sort of he's kind of a savant. Like he's very smart in multiple ways. Um, but one of the things he loved to do was build computers and build software. So he was coding for IBM in the 80s and 90s, and I remember being 5 or 6 and having our first computer down in the basement.
Wow. Was it big and slow and monochrome monitor kind of thing?
Those were the tiny, like
Oh,
the
that's
really
right.
tiny, tiny, tiny screens.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And we played, I remember Hoyle, the game.
Okay.
That's like what I remember playing on because it must have just come out early 90s. Um, Yeah, and then going to work with my mom on the weekends, I learned, there was WordPerfect first. I remember that.
Sure.
Typewriters. I would go in and, do the forms of triplicate and I love office supplies. Um, and then they had gotten Word and I loved PowerPoint. So like I am obsessed with PowerPoint. I would make them for my friends. I would then edit stuff with my mother. She would print out a copy for me and then I would edit. Um, yeah, so the lawyers all knew me by the time I worked there, which was odd and good at the same time.
I used to make band posters with Draw Perfect before we jumped over to. Do you remember
Yes.
Draw Perfect?
Yes, I do.
Maybe I don't know if you're younger than me, but yeah, Word Perfect and Draw Perfect. It was just this rudimentary like tool, but I just made band
I
posters because
loved it.
I was in a band at the time, and it was what you did, staple them up on telephone poles. So thanks,
Yeah, it was
Oppenheimer,
fun to be
for the paper.
creative, right?
Yeah, it was fun to be creative. And that's always kind of what was a draw for me to move. I started out in the library at Oppenheimer Wolf and Donnelly, but when it was Oppenheimer Wolf and Donnelly, and still have many friends at that firm now. And but then I got into IT, so I was always kind of a technology person as well. So it was fun to do. But really, the creative side, kind of compelled me to pursue marketing and then ultimately business development because, like you, we were talking about being salespeople and nobody really likes to feel like a salesperson, but we both are like relationship people. I know when I've run into you in passing or we've connected at LMA events, you are like the most people person there in an organization full of people. You know what I mean? So it's fun to hear, even though you were always in a communication role in the firms that you've worked in, you're a relationship person too.
I think one of my strengths is really getting to know somebody and then being able to offer solutions in that vein.
Right.
There's so many different ways to go about doing the same thing. There's so many different styles of writing. There's so many different technology tools. It gets very overwhelming with the possibilities, but if you can say, okay, you are like this and here's your current workflow, how can I then slot these things in that I want you to do with what you're already doing? I love
Right.
doing that.
What did you see? So in your earlier jobs, before you had the epiphany that we talked about just before we started recording, what did you, how were you connecting the writing that you were doing, the communications projects that you were doing in these law firms with the big picture in terms of messaging before you got your hands on the behind the scenes data that really kind of transformed things for you, and we'll talk about that second. But like, what was it like before you got access to the data behind the scenes?
Oh man, that's a great question. It was mostly, in the feedback I think that I got. And some of it is I do like to rock the boat a little bit. I'm a little rebellious,
Okay.
but I think having a creative mind in a what was, back then, what I graduated college in 2007, it, I liked injecting that creativity and that human touch to the things that they were doing because that's wasn't what I was seeing, right? Like, these
Hmm.
are very highly educated people. And my dad was really that. Like, they don't necessarily come across as somebody who would go out of their way to have a conversation with you in real life, but they're brilliant and they can talk about the thing that makes them brilliant. And so I like having those connections and being able to create something that despite me explaining it to them and them not wanting to hear it, but I could show them that. I could show them what that effort looked like at the end of it, and they were like, "Whoa!" So
Hmm.
I think I liked proving them wrong in a way, with the things that I developed. So I don't necessarily think I was intentional about it encompassing what the strategy was or what the whole firm, but I just think
Sure.
instinctively I want to relate to people on a human level, and I think that that's true across the board, even in business.
Right. And that's what we're always trying to uh, encapsulate in a variety of ways for the lawyers that we work with and the law firms that we work with, right? We want these folks to make these connections. And if you, as the writer and or the person who's helping pull the things that make that lawyer distinctive, that make them, I don't want to use the word unique because that's overused, but the thing that makes them distinctive, the thing that helps them stand out or differentiate themselves, or find the true voice that's gonna fuel them to continue to share and build relationships and do the things that we know help build books of business. Um, yeah, being that creative, inquisitive person, I think is probably, and with sort of a technical mindset, I think is a critical skill set to have, don't you think?
Yes, and I mean, I'm an old millennial, so technically I was supposed to be have one foot in, one foot out, but I think I like the way that, I think I grew up at the right time, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like
Yeah.
I had those skills and they have very much served me well in my career, but they were just there and they were, I don't know. It's weird to see my kids now grow up with the technology and how ingrained it was versus when it came out when we were kids.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
nobody had it. It was a privilege. Like people didn't
Mhm.
know how to use it, but I loved the possibilities of it all.
Yeah. And
Um,
I'm Gen X, so like we didn't have it. Like we didn't even know it could exist, until people started walking around with these things that we'd only seen on Star Trek. It's like, wait a minute,
right?
communicators are real? And then and
I
then it
remember
was just like,
watching,
yeah, go ahead.
well, then it boomed. I mean, I watched Inspector Gadget. I actually just wrote something about this, but like, Penny had that book and then you got the Kindle, I loved all of that stuff. But I'm still like, I have pens, I have paper. I still like the analog, but putting the two together, I think is fun for me.
So now you're at JD Supra. So you're not working inside law firms anymore. So still in a communications organization or in a writerly role and in a relationship role. Um, but you were sharing earlier there was an epiphany when you got to see the data behind the posts and the published articles and things. So let's peel that back.
Well, this is, I've been with JD Supra for a little over 2 years now, but I have been a client for 15 years.
Yeah.
And again, being in a communications role, I had met them at my very first LMA conference that, yeah, my boss at Winthrop and Weinstein sent me to, who I loved. And we were sitting down to dinner, and we were just having a conversation, nothing about business. And at some point, one of our friends was like, "Well, what do you guys do?" And they told us, and I was like, "Oh, great." And nobody sold to me. And I think I got back and um one of their colleagues was like, hey, can I show you what JD Super does? I was like, oh yeah, like, oh, go ahead. It was kind of like that mentality. And this was Paul, actually. Paul showed me what it did. And this was what, 2010, maybe around 2010. So Twitter was like the digital media of choice, and you got click rates.
Hmm.
That's all we had to go off of. And they could show me names. And I think I told Paul, I was like, why the F did you not show me this earlier? Or like, why didn't you tell me it did this?
Lead with that.
It was mind blowing. And I think that was the first time I really understood that you could take a marketing tactic and get intelligence out of it that helped you
Yeah.
with sales.
Yeah.
And, that was an eye opener.
You then became a JD Supra client when you were still at that firm. And
Yeah.
then that began this sort of like, yeah, this is one of the ways that we can understand better how our services are resonating with the kind of people that we want to do more of those services for. Uh, so that's astonishing. Like I feel like it, I mean, we're talking about old school memories and technology. Like I'm old enough that I remember seeing my first word processor and it
Yes.
blew my mind. Like there was a paragraph of text and somebody deleted some text in the middle of the paragraph and the whole paragraph kind of reflowed. Like, of course it reflowed. Everybody knows that. Like our kids know that. Of course it does. But like I'd never seen that before in my life. And so I think about all these firsts that really, as technology moves as quickly as it does, as it has over the past, I mean, it's been a long time, but still like back when you started, was well into the time when I started. Like my first law firm job was in 1990. It was really felt like stone knives and bearskins back then. But yeah, all of these technology changes are astonishing. What's your role at JD Supra now?
I work with our partners, so people like consultants and folks who work with our client base.
Great.
Because I am what you would call kind of an evangelist, but I also understand marketing. I understand the consultants that we're working with, and I think, that role is looking for people who both understand what JD Super does and likes it, and that's,
Hmm.
like we like you, you like us. Let's figure out how to make that work better for our
Right.
clients. Or how can I
Right.
teach you how to do things to help you, help your clients better. So it's things like that. It's an interesting role. It's not something I'm always been straight up communications, but this, like you said, I've got a big network. I
Right.
like the relationships I've built through LMA, and I think that that's valuable here.
Oh, it's the greatest group of people around. I think like,
It
I
is.
mean,
It's a good,
and that's, I mean, that's why it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is just to sort of talk to as many people as I can. But also I just knew that like the whole thing, the whole environment is built on helping each other. Like why, I mean, we're competing, the firms are competing, but like we're just trying to do the best work that we can do for the lawyers that we're supporting. And, it still sounds to me like that's what you're working on as well. You all are just there to help lawyers be successful and help marketing people be successful. So
yep.
what are people coming to JD Supra for now? That I was leading to this earlier when I was saying like technology, there's been so much change in technology since you started, since I started. It's way different now. So what's the biggest concern or the biggest reason, the biggest new reason that people are coming to JD Supra? So let's say marketing and communications folks inside law firms, why are they seeking you guys out now? What's different
I,
now?
I would say AI.
Yeah,
And the
I was
funny thing
thinking,
is, right? Well, what's really interesting to me is I've never liked SEO. Let me just put that way because it felt like
okay,
such a game to me, and we're gamifying content, which I don't like. Like,
yep, yep,
we're stuffing it. I mean, I didn't do this, but like, that was sort of the vibe was we're just going to stuff it with these keywords so you can get found, and it has nothing to do with
right,
your expertise or like how well you can
right.
write a piece of
And you can
content.
you can see that in content too, right? Like,
You
yeah,
can.
don't be that firm.
But they built like they've been in some ways, a lot of the technology that they've built has changed, but the fundamentals haven't.
Yeah,
And the reason we have such a good reputation is because we've stuck to the content. It's been all about
sure.
how much value you can provide, not, how salesy is this, or, how many can you get off in a month? It's
Hmm.
literally about the quality of the content. And I think that's why we have such authority with search engines and AI,
Hmm.
because we have that reputation, and the reputation is solid.
Right. And
It's
it built on
concrete.
authenticity, built on authenticity.
But now we
Right.
have the data to back it up,
Yeah.
which is really crazy to
Yeah.
me. I've had
Yeah.
SEO people be like, "How can this SEO be real? Like we thought it was all fake." But it's legitimately 20 years of that focus, which is
Right.
I like that. As a marketer, I like and appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think it's people using content as a way to get visibility through AI and search engines.
Sure. And as law firms and marketing and communications people, but also the BD people are like lapping up the data that comes from, these publications and the reach. It's also interesting to see when SEO is working and working with the authentic language that a firm is using that really showcases their expertise. They're not jamming it with expertise that isn't authentic. It's like they just are writing about, they're sticking to their knitting, I guess, as to use one of those phrases. Like that's a, a pathway to success. So what advice would you have for a Marcom person who's like, okay, do I focus on AEO now? Do I focus on SEO now? Where do I begin? What's the mix? Where should they focus the bulk of their energy, in your
I
opinion?
mean, if you're in content, it's good content. I think a lot of content does have some fundamentals that match over with SEO, like, titles and
Hmm.
sections,
Right.
scannability, but that's a digital marketing, that's a UI UX thing. It's not necessarily an
Hmm.
SEO thing. So I think if you're really paying attention to what's going on in SEO, at the end of the day, a lot of those things are just fundamentals of other things. They're fundamentals of a good piece of content. They're fundamentals of a good website. And you have to put those two together. So you have to be aware of them to me. But at the end of the day, your content's still going to suck if you're not a good, a content producer, not necessarily
Right.
writer. There's all different types of content, but
Right.
you can't get away with that. And I don't think technology can replicate that yet.
Okay, so how should we be using AI in the development of content, right? Because I think, I mean, you are a writer from your DNA. Some people are writers because they gravitate toward that later in life. Some people don't know why they're writers, but these AI tools are available to help people iterate, to help people organize, to help people outline. So how do you see a healthy, helpful way to use AI in the Marcom space?
I don't think that you can let it create for you. I think
Agree.
you originate the idea. I have no problem like having you brain dump if it's something that you record. Because not everybody's gonna be a writer. There are different mediums, but if you can give it what comes out of your mouth, what comes out of your hand, and have it help shape that for you,
Hmm.
I feel like that's totally in line. But I like it more for efficiencies. Um, so helping me, if I'm a handwriter, okay, I write
Okay.
most of my things. I love to be able to take a picture of it and have it start a draft for me. So
Mm.
it's not doing any thinking for me. I mean, it is in a way that it's trying to, translate my handwriting, but I like those things where it hits the in between. It's not changing my behavior. It's not giving me something that I wouldn't ordinarily do, but it's the filler in between. It helps me get to the next spot that I need to go in. That's what I like about it. Or again, intelligence. Let me, use it for search, research. What are people
Hmm.
talking about? How can I fit in? Um, More of that kind of thing, but not, I don't
Sure.
like it generating things.
I should have prepared, I should have found this poem before I got on here. I didn't expect us to go do a deep dive on AI, but I guess I should always expect that it's going to lead to AI because that's just sort of
That's what's going
ubiquitous right
on.
now. But I early on in the chat days, I asked AI to write a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare. Um, and I can't remember what the topic was, but sort of love lost, and I just let it go. I didn't give it a very complicated prompt. I just said, do it in the style of Shakespeare, and here's the subject that you should write. And it was actually, I wasn't a great sonnet. I was a theater major, so Shakespeare near and dear to my heart, and sonnets in particular are beautiful. But it chose some words and turns of phrase that I thought that I never would have come up with. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like it can, the spontaneity or maybe the randomness of it is better. Like I think it was David Bowie who would just cut up words. He'd write words on paper, cut them up, mix them up, and then just sort of sift through them until ideas came up. So he did that in a very manual, analog way. But I had the same experience when I had AI generate that sonnet. Like it was like, oh, I wouldn't use that word that way, but now I might. Like that's kind of a cool idea, right? I wouldn't let it write I wouldn't say, hey, I wrote this sonnet that AI wrote, but yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of ways to use it.
It's interesting. I still think it'll get you the same formula if you use it in the same way. If two people on opposite ends of the earth fill out, I think.
Right. If they put in the same prompt, they're going to get the same thing. Yeah.
Yes. I think it ends up being an average and not
sure.
something a unique person would come up with.
Yeah, that's a good way to,
right.
Like going, right? Hey, Laura, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun to sit down with you and talk about stuff.
Yeah, same. Back at you.
Yeah, so we'll see you around, obviously, because we see each other all the time. And we just found out that we weren't connected on LinkedIn. So good on us for now being connected on LinkedIn too.
Right.
I hope to see you in person.
We'll keep in touch.
The BD Catalyst, a podcast for law firm business development and marketing changemakers, is brought to you by Lawyer Book Builder and BDBuddy.ai, technology designed to help law firms create an exceptional culture of business development. Our host is Kristo Sween, and our editor is Melanie Cristostomo. The BD Catalyst is a production of the David Freeman Consulting Group. Learn more at davidfreemanconsulting.com.